So I was always gonna do this company, but my guy Alejandro, all the way over in Spain, whipped out one of the mostest mid-school frames ever. And I'm like, yes, need to start researching this. But before we get to that, let me introduce you to Fly Bikes. What up people, Derek here with benDy Tubes, and number one, I want to wish everybody a happy new year. I think it's January 2nd, so moved on into 2025. Get ready to clock over 1 year with benDy Tubes. Number two, happy to whatever holiday you celebrated this past week or week and a half. Hope it was enjoyable, restful, and time for you to get out and ride a little bit. So let's jump into this company. Founded in 2000 in Spain, Fly Bikes was the brainchild of David Casada, and they hit the ground rolling in 2002 with the Micro Machine. Designed by, and news to me, none other than Vicky Gomez. And I'm jumping right in because Fly did as well. From the jump, they had a flat frame, which is awesome. It wasn't their only frame at the time. There were some park, there were some street bikes, but this was an early offering, so well done. The Micro Machine has an 18.75 top tube, 75-degree head tube angle, and a 13-inch chainstay. I just want to say that this is like another really good looking frame. Like, I love the reflective plane design, straight tubes opposite straight tubes, bent tubes opposite bent tubes. This first version was super clean. Kind of chonky, bigger tubes, American bottom bracket, integrated headset, maybe, but also had some brake bigs. Like I said, really solid first offering. And at this point, Fly had some heavy hitters on the roster, including Phil Dolan, Sam Folks, and one aforementioned Vicky Gomez. These dudes went on to do a ton more in the flatland scene, but this is a freaking stable for a young company like this. So back to the Micro Machine. Guess what? Actually had one. I traded my KGB Psycho Necta for it because in my infinite ignorance, I thought that this was the OG bent tube frame. Honestly, I know now way more than that, but my buddy had it and I wanted it. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like it as much as the KGB Psycho Necta. Just like I said, I love that 73.5-degree head tube angle, but that's fruit in the sangria at this point. Also, this was the second time that I had two bikes from the same manufacturer. Fly Micro Machine in the foreground and hipster sitting on his bed with the three amigos in the background. Also, another favorite picture of mine, this was a bunny hop contest. I tied Colt Todorovich jumping 42 inches way back in the day, so it's rad. Okay, Micro Machine, muy bueno. There were actually two versions. The second one dropped around 04, 05. Much cleaner, simpler, couple easy ways to tell the difference. Number one, there's a hole drilled in the dropout. Number two, if you could see the dropouts, they got a little bit more shapely. Also, the tubes lost some weight. So you can see this kind of thigh gap head tube opening right here. I don't know if that's a thing, but I'm gonna call it a thing. So that was the second generation of Fly Micro Machine. Then Fly followed it up with this mid-school delight. More new school, kind of old school, with the 05 Simple. Straight tubes, 18.8 or 19.2 top tube, 75-degree head tube angle. This bike had some really thoughtful design elements, like for sure, and it lived up to its namesake. Gusset up front, optional brakes, really fancy removable gyro brake hardware. Nice, like I said, really clean. But I'm moving on because there's something far radder right around the corner. Now, Fly saw that flatland was totally its own thing and it needed its own focus. So they made one of the best brands ever, Suelo. Y'all, I love Suelo, like love Suelo. Also, they've got the best logo in the game. So in 06, Suelo took over the name Simple and made the Suelo Simple. This thing went through a few generations, 3 to be exact, and you guessed it, V1, V2, V3. It looks like the seat tube shrank a little bit, given a lower step over height, more room to move around. Also, the V3 had these really rad ovalized seat stays and chain stays, which I'll talk about more right now. They make a really smooth taper down to the dropout, which is pretty unique. Like, I don't see a lot of frames doing this. Dropouts had some internal machining to save a couple grams. 18 or 18.6 top tube, 75-degree head tube angle, 13-inch chainstay in the V1 and V2. Now the V3 in 08 gets a little interesting. It is fully heat treated, it is 3.7 pounds, and it has an even steeper 75.5-degree head tube angle. Fully removable brake hardware, which is super clean, built-in chain tensioners, those fancy seat stays like I mentioned. This thing is clean AF. But y'all don't care about that. I mean, you might, but there's one thing right around the corner made in 08 that I really want to talk about, and that is the 1.0, the only O, the Tubo. And this is a bendy tube's first. I think there are 3 single tube flatland frames that existed, and the Tubo is the first of the Y frames that we're gonna cover. In 08, Suelo said the less tubes, the more better, and they got this massive ovalized hunk of steel and made what you see here. 18.8 top tube, 75-degree head tube angle, 13-inch rear end, and only 3.7 pounds once again. So the dims are pretty standard, but man, this tube in these bins, the ovalized seat stay, quoting Alejandro, this thing is a whiplash machine. So much room on the front of the bike for activities. And if I'm being very honest, like, this is a brutalist design. It's not gentle, it's not understated, it's not elegant. This is a big, huge stamp of boldness. Nothing subtle, nothing hiding, one tube to rule them all. And honestly, I don't want to jump away from this too quick. It's such a unique bike. The way the top tube and down tube bend out from the massive monocoque main tube. Here's Jun Okayama riding an 07 prototype. So once again, not a showpiece, but like a legitimate pro level frame, which is super rad. And the wild thing is, on this one, you can see gyro tab holes on the head tube, but there are no back brakes. So like, they just grabbed a head tube from stock and built this thing up off of it. That's so cool to see companies using existing components to fab up prototypes like this. Then in 2011, moving on from the Tubo, in 2011, one of the most stylish riders out there, Moto Sasaki, got a signature new school frame from Suelo, the Moto. Little shorter than the simple 18-inch top tube, shorter 12.8-inch chainstays, and a little more slack and radical 74.5-degree head tube angle. No gussets, straight tube, and those ovalized stays like I've mentioned multiple times. Another super clean frame from Suelo. And honestly, this thing is beautiful. There's just something about an ultra short bike like this. Even though it's got no bends, the proportions are golden. I mean, oh, look at it. This reminds me of the first time whenever I found ground whip and just looked at frames for days. Love flatland bikes, the proportions are spot on. This one's exactly that. Finally, Suelo got into the complete game in 2014 with the Moto Am, X, and Pro. 3 tiers built off that sick Moto frame, front and back brakes, gyro, free coaster, 4 pegs. The Pro got 0 offset Suelo V2 forks, broader Suelo Pro component package like pegs, sprocket, and tires, but maybe not the brakes. And the Am and X for amateur and expert, forks had a little bit of offset, but all these bikes had 2-piece bars, stuff like that. There's a website I'll link below that highlights all this, but I'm just glad they existed. It's cool that Suelo made these and to learn about them during this research process. So those are the frames, but you can't talk about Suelo without talking about their bits. One, their forks, specifically the V1s, are my favorite pair of forks I've ever had. Really the only pair I've had in modern history since I bought them brand new from Flatland Fuel back in the day. But the main detail that I love are the dropouts. How it's one piece, tapered down, no weld, super clean, and really light, like 780 grams, which are lighter than the V2, but the V2 are said to be ultra light. So V1 forks, amazing. Their bars are also iconic. 2-piece looking 4-piece having butted tube little mid-school bars that they are. They made some sick pegs out of magnesium, sprockets, stems, cranks, these awesome tires, and the extra long customizable grips that are full-on delayed differentiation before that was even a word in our lexicon. And their whole parts package could be had in fun colors like purple, pink, gold, white, and bikes look absolutely sick with the coordinated colors from Suelo, just like this one right here. So love the component package. And there seemed to be multiple versions of the bits. Like it was hard to track down what's what and where, but they ended with a V3, which seems to be the bastion of mid-schoolery from Suelo. But the part and the greatest component that they ever made was them brakes. You know it, I know it. Suelo brakes are possibly the greatest brakes of all time. Full stop, bar none. Ultra low profile, forged, CNC machine 6061 T6 heat treated aluminum. These things are stupid stiff. And the hardware's super thoughtful too. Nice little cams and stuff like that. So a couple versions of these grace this floating ball that we live on. Version 1 was actually mistakenly made upside down. So if you look at the webbing and you can see webbing on the top, upside down, wrong version, version 1. Version 2 flipped it, got back to the webbing at the bottom. That's your V2. I have the purple V1 pair that I'm hopefully showing here, and they are awesome. They're so great. And the cool thing is that they're still using this decades old manufacturing technique to make some slick rear brakes today. So you can still get your hands on a pair of fly brakes that they are now. But back to the company, unfortunately Suelo's no more. Fly is still making bikes, and they're actually sponsoring one of the smoothest riders out there right now, Varo Hernandez. I think he might be riding a Fuego 20-inch top tube, but his style is so spot on. And I'm glad that Fly's still in the flatland game. I actually heard that they may be testing some flatland components to get back into that genre of BMX. And if that's true, I, for one, cannot wait to see those hit the market. And that's it, y'all. Fly, Suelo, muy bueno, making one of the raddest flatland bikes of the mid-school, the Tubo. As always, Derek, benDy Tubes, thanks for watching.